Weather Channel. No place on Earth has better weather.
A good Wednesday morning to you. It's now about 10 minutes before the top of the hour, and time now for the tropical update. We start things off by looking at the huge Pacific Basin, and the feature that really stands out most noticeably is a huge swirling vortex out here in the East Pacific. Well, that is a hurricane, Hurricane Guillermo. And at one point, Guillermo was a very, very powerful Category 5 hurricane. It has dropped a little bit, now down to a Category 4 hurricane, but still a very intense and a very dangerous hurricane, no doubt about that. Right now, maximum sustained winds up to 140 miles an hour, and it continues to pull off towards the west at about 16 miles an hour. Again, you have a very noticeable eye with this hurricane, and the central pressure is being estimated at 27.46 inches of mercury. Now, for the most part, this is a very, very powerful hurricane, but luckily, it's really not affecting any major land areas right now, at least not directly, as it continues to swirl and churn over the open waters of the Pacific. Again, there's the eye of the hurricane. You can definitely see the counterclockwise circulation right around the eye, a very good banding, very good outflow. So indeed a very well organized hurricane that continues to churn up the waters across the Pacific. It's a long ways away from Hawaii and a real long ways away from the Mexican shoreline as well. But it has indirectly affected land areas. Even back into California, we had some big seas and big swells and some very dangerous riptides. And I know the weather's been extremely hot into California. A lot of folks are heading off to the beaches, but be really careful because we have some dangerously high tides throughout this region and some dangerous rip currents and rip tides, and they're all being generated because of Hurricane Guillermo. And we think that eventually those big swells too will be impacting Hawaii. Probably sometime in the next 24 to 48 hours or so, we'll start to see some higher than usual seas and swells too affecting Hawaii. So that is currently the biggest problem that we have with Guillermo. Now also with Guillermo, it will eventually start to work over some cooler waters, so gradually it will start to weaken some.
The Weather Channel. No place on Earth has better weather.
Okay, it's time to check on the tropics, and here we go. Guillermo, it's a monster. It was a Category 5 with 160 mile an hour winds yesterday, winds gusting to 195 miles an hour, and it was a big one. It's about as strong as they get for this part of the world. I think it was number 2 on the all-time pressure list in this part of the world. And of course, with the particulars, we'll save that for our afternoon crew. You know, that's the way they do in the weather business. Save for the afternoon guys. So we'll save for Rich Johnson and John Hope to give you the updates. All right, here we go. Guillermo, here's the very latest from the Hurricane Center. 15.8 north, 127.5 west. If you're plodding along at home, that's about 1,235 miles to the southwest of Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. So it's no threat to any land areas. Top winds now down to 130 miles an hour. Pressure has risen, they estimate anyway, from 930 millibars to 948 millibars, so the weakening process is underway. And you know, a lot of people here in Hawaii saying, that's good, make it weaken some more. And it should. As we take a look at the close-up view here, wow, look at that, looking pretty healthy here. Not quite as impressive, not quite as beautiful a picture as it was yesterday, but still a very powerful storm churning out across the open waters of the Pacific. But again, the weakening process has started, but still a formidable system, but it is forecast to weaken further. Now we have those swells being generated by the storm as all that energy comes out over the water. These big swells are coming up towards the south-facing beaches of Southern California here. Heavy surf advisories are out. Had reports of the lifeguards having to rescue surfers and swimmers yesterday with all the dangerous riptides. And we were checking on the swells here. There's a northwesterly swell coming in from a big upper low in the North Pacific. Now we have these southerly swells coming on up from Guillermo. So you know it just has to be rough as all get out here off the coastal waters of Southern California. And the forecast is calling for the breakers to be coming on in at 6 to 8 feet and occasional 10-footers coming in on the south-facing beaches, so especially beaches like Zuma and also around Newport there. It's going to be a very rough day indeed. So I know a lot of people are headed off to the beaches to escape this big heat wave in Southern California, but please be very careful as you're strolling along the shores here. These big breakers can come on in at short notice there, so you don't want to get caught. Now, as we show you the Guillermo again, here you can see it's a relationship to Southern California. Very far away, but those ocean swells, they've been propagating northward, and they're now coming on up into the southern coastal waters of California. Should get up towards the Bay Area coastal waters by tomorrow and Friday. Now, as we head our way west, though, here's Hawaii. Some slightly cooler waters here, so this storm should start to slowly weaken, and by the time it approaches the Hawaiian Islands, probably in the vicinity of Sunday night, well, it'll be a very different type of a system. Nothing like what it's doing right now. Okay, we go to the far.
You can see a definite weakening trend. The top wind's now down to 125 miles an hour. Remember, it was up as high as 160. It's gone now from a Category 5 hurricane down to a Category 3. It's still 1,720 miles from the Big Island from Hilo, Hawaii, but it is moving toward the west at 17 miles an hour. And we do expect it to continue to weaken, and we hope by the time it could get anywhere near Hawaii, which would not be before, say, Sunday, we think there will be very much weaker than it is now. Well, even though it's centered more than 1,000 miles from California, nevertheless, they're getting high surf along the beaches there. So a high surf advisory is out from Point Conception down to San Diego. And we've had reports on the beaches there as surf up as high as 10 feet with some pretty dangerous riptides. So if you go down there to surf, be careful, because those riptides, as you know, can be very treacherous. Now, as we look at our satellite picture, we still have, even though it is weakened, a very well-defined hurricane. You can see the eye very plainly. The reds, as a matter of fact, the last hour or two around the center have increased a little bit. So for the next 24 hours, it's not going to weaken all that fast, but after that, we think it will. And I'll explain to you why we think that is so. Here's a visible satellite picture. Again, you can see the eye. You can see that counterclockwise rotation in the low levels, and you can see the upper outflow, which is counterclockwise. It's still a classical looking hurricane, about like you'd want to draw up if you wanted to illustrate one, say, in a meteorological textbook. As we look at the overall big picture, there's the center of the hurricane, there's the Big Island of Hawaii, and it is still, as we indicated earlier, still some 1,700 miles away. Well, the reason that we are quite confident that this is going to weaken is the look we have at the sea surface temperatures, and we can show you that as well. The hurricane is centered now right about in this area where we still have some deep reds, and the deep reds show where the temperature is 80 degrees or higher, and we know that a hurricane, in order to maintain itself, has to be over water that warm. Well, between there and Hawaii, we can see some tendency for yellow there, and that temperature there is in the low 70s, and we feel pretty sure that this will weaken. Now, we hope it'll be down to even less than a tropical storm by the time it gets to Hawaii, but we'll watch it very carefully, and we'll report on what we learn to
Where it has been active is in the East Pacific here. Over the last few days, we've had, I guess, what in the West Pacific would call a super typhoon. At one point, Guillermo had winds maximum sustained at 160 miles an hour, making it one of the most powerful hurricanes ever in the East Pacific. It was a monster, folks. Still a pretty potent system, but it is weakening. Wanted to show you this loop because you can see Mexico, Baja California, the west coast of the U.S., by the way, which is being affected by swells from Guillermo. And right there is the Big Island of Hawaii, and Guillermo is headed in that general direction. More on that in a moment. 16.4 north and 130.3 west. This is the brand new advisory out within the last hour. That centers Guillermo about 1,640 miles east-southeast of Hilo on the Big Island right there. So still a fair piece away. Winds have now backed off to 115 miles an hour. So it is barely a Category 3 hurricane now, and we think that weakening trend will continue, moving west-northwesterly at 16 miles an hour. Really can't see much of an eye anymore. There definitely is still a extremely good circulation, obviously. Most of the convection are real heavy clouds, if you will, the deeper clouds, the thunderstorm clouds. They're to the south of the center of circulation. That's because the northern part of the circulation is over much cooler water. And it's that cool water which is going to continue to weaken Guillermo as we head on through time, as it continues to generally spin its way off to the west-northwest. Now, as it approaches the Hawaiian Islands in the next several days. We think that this weakening trend will continue, and it may probably not even be a hurricane anymore, and maybe not even a tropical storm. That's how much we think this system will probably weaken. And there are now indications that a bit of a trough trying to swing in northwest of Hawaii may actually start to have a shearing effect on Guillermo in a couple of days. So looks like it's seen its peak performance, so to speak, and is now on the wane. There are heavy surf advisories because of the swells generated by Guillermo at its peak a couple of days ago. It's taken that long for the swells to get here. Some sets have been upwards of 10 feet along some of those south-facing beaches there, from Zuma to Malibu down to Huntington and Newport Beach. Some pretty good swells if you want to go out and brave that. It was kind of nasty, though. Again, there is Guillermo, there are the Hawaiian Islands, and in between, see this yellow shading here?